Next, I would like to invite Mark Duman, who will both inspire us and put our feet back on the ground, providing an impatient perspective.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for speaking English. I'm Scottish, so I'm going to try and speak English, but it's not my native tongue. It's better than Yiddish, although I think being in Basel, I could probably speak Yiddish, and half of you will understand when I say that I'm schwitzing. So I'm rather warm. I've got the graveyard slot, so everything, first of all, thank you for staying, right? You know, that's brilliant. And everything that I was going to say has already been said. So I think we should just finish early and I'll go for a beer. Yeah? Great. No, half joking. We've talked about technology, we've talked about home nursing and telemedicine and supplies being delivered to a patient's home. Well, wouldn't that make things easier? We've talked a little bit about not health literacy or data literacy, can't even say the word, but clinical trial literacy. And I'm just going to give you a couple of slides. But what's important today, I think, and again, as a creationist, and we can talk about that over a beer, I think if you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, you might be given a hint as to how you should be a better person, a better trialist, a better clinician, a better spouse, a better parent. Listen twice as much as you speak. Because what I've heard today is when you go and listen to other people, you learn. And you see the world from different perspectives. And I'm not sure we quite do enough of that. Now here we go, wait a minute. Now this looks, what do I do with this? The green, oh, the big, oh, right, okay, the one that looks like an arrow. Okay, right. So I'm impatient, right? It's my nature, I'm now a grandpa, I'm grumpy, I can't be arsed waiting, I just want things to happen. And what I'm sitting here today hearing about is all this stuff happening, but in little pockets. And I want to give pharma companies a prize for copying and for sharing and for looking out, not just looking up. And we'll come on to that in a minute. So I'm going to talk about 5 things. I'm going to talk a little bit about patient engagement or person engagement. And I heard somebody today talk about a person, not a patient. I'm going to talk about language, because there's nothing better than a Scotsman telling you about language, okay? And I'm going to keep it clean, I promise, okay? I'll even have a non-alcoholic beer later just to reverse stereotypes, okay? I think you're all hiding behind innovation. And what I mean by that is innovation is about invention and adoption. And you're also focused on invention, you forget about adoption. And I have to say, hands off to Medable, and I'm not being paid for this, but when I hear a company say, we have 150 patients in our council, and we listen to them, well, hello everybody, why aren't you doing the same? It's not about what you think that we want, it's actually asking us what works for us. And if you're not asking, I don't care how good your human factors people are, and your UX guys and gals, and how big your brains are, and how big your molecules are, you have to speak to end users. That's what it's about. And I'm going to talk a little bit of my experience of trials, which will make your hair stand on end for those of you that still have hair, right? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the future. And I'm going to give you some tasks to do. And I was going to do that whole thing about standing at the front and the postprandial dip where everyone's like, oh, is someone still talking? And get you to all stand up. But I'm not, because, you know, that's your choice, not mine. So, red bits, right? We've all got red bits, okay? So I'm going to focus on our red bits, right? I think there's something about, I'm a pharmacist by profession. I'm non-practicing. If I don't say that, I'll probably get, well, I was about to say struck off, but I'm no longer on the register. But I just have to say that because I'm no longer on the general pharmaceutical list. But I focused my entire life for 20 years, you know, and then 30 years doing something else. And like the gentleman before me, yes, I know I don't look old enough, but just focusing on X. And that's what we do because we see the world as we are. One of the things I want you to do tonight, if you do get home, and I'll get home to Manchester about 11 o'clock, and I've tried this for 20 years and it's never worked, but it's to try and explain to my wife and wonderful kids, who are not as wonderful as my wife, what I do for a living. Well, Dad goes and talks to people and stands up and does lots of calls and walks around the kitchen. I mean, that's about it. But they don't get it. Can you explain clearly to your friends, your family, your loved ones, your partners, etc., what you do? That's the first stage in beginning to explain all that science. I was sitting beside a guy on the plane last night, flying from Heathrow, and he said, well, he was Swiss and I was Scottish, and I sort of went, hello, and he went, oh. And I went, it's okay, I'm not going to bite, and there's a seat between us, don't worry. And I said, oh, I'm going off to speak at a conference for Roche. He goes, oh, I work for Roche. And he was lovely, and we had a whole conversation. I don't know if he's here today, but I tried to get him to come, but I think I might have scared him off with the subsequent conversation. But he saw the world as X. He's in early clinical, and I'm not going to work out who it was, and he was talking about healthy subjects, very much into clinical trial language and all the rest of it. And I learned a lot just using my 2 ears and less of my mouth. And there's a friend of mine in the States, and we met a couple of months ago. He was doing some work for MSD in Maryland, or however you pronounce it. I say Maryland, and they're like, where's Maryland? You know. He said, we're always people and we're sometimes patients. Because I get a bit fed up with people going, oh, we're all patients. Well, yeah, maybe, sort of, but I like that, because that's sometimes just a bit more engaging. And patient engagement in life sciences is getting better. None of these are adverts, and I'm not suggesting any, ice cream or any supplier or CRO is better than the other. I'm just sharing some stuff. A new publication just came out, and when you're sitting bored and you want to read a 160-page PDF, please go to our friends at IQVIA and download this. Bit difficult to read on my phone, but they very nicely sent me a hard copy because I still like reading things, right? Astellas. Not only do they publish a patient partnership report, but shock horror, they actually give you pictures of who's in their patient partnership team and say, please contact us. When I speak to other pharma companies, it's like, no, you can't get in, you can't talk to us. It's like, hello, you want patient partnership? Talk to us. That's amazing. Not hidden behind, who are you serving? Us? And then there's a lovely thing from Novartis. This is their framework. Pfizer's currently working on one that, again, begins to measure patient engagement. And there's a couple of tools out there that do that. Now, we've talked a lot about regulators. And I have to say, I am in love with the FDA. Well, what's left of it, right? But have you ever seen a regulator produce a colorful slide, right, that talks about patient engagement? I mean, hello? If that's not a sign that things are changing, I don't know what is. Yeah, you'll get the slides later because just to confuse you, I put it in reverse, right? Because just the way it is. But hello, talking about HIV, talking about breast cancer patients, right? We are here to stay. I have diabetes, obesity, liver disease, another reason for drinking a non-alcoholic beer later on. But to see regulators begin to publish this stuff, that's changing. And what I've heard a lot today is about you have to talk to a lot of people. But who do you prioritize? Is it looking up to the regulations and having to do what they say? And sometimes they get it wrong. Or is it looking outwards and using the evidence and the real world evidence that you're collecting and saying to regulators, you're not quite getting it right. You're well-intentioned and you're doing things better, but this is actually what we're finding. Safety first, yes, but also real life experience also first, second. For those of you that are British, and I count myself still as British, and don't get me started on not being part of the European Union. We've got enough, I'm going to have to stay for quite a few beers, actually, right? But we've just published this literally last week. We're waiting for something called the 10-year plan, which we believe is going to come out on the 5th of July, which I think is a Saturday, but is the actual birthday of the NHS, back in 1948. And it's talking all about interesting things. The NIHR, our equivalent of the NIH, and long may our NIHR continue to exist, is looking at actually building into the NHS app, which has at least 30 million users using it and a lot of people registered because it was used for COVID, beginning to look at public, not just patient, but public access to trials. And we're trying this wonderful thing of looking at a single source of clinical trial data. We've tried that before. Governments haven't been very good at it. There's lots of companies doing it better and quicker, but at least we're trying to do some of that stuff. Now, who has seen Upati? Anybody seen Upati in the past? A couple of you. So this is from 2007. If I'm being honest, I think it needs a wee bit of an upgrade. But this is talking about where patients in medicines development can get involved. If you haven't seen it, download it, have a look at it, tick the bits that you're doing, mark the bits you're not, and maybe try and do more of it. And there's people out there trying to make trial summaries so much easier. We talked about literacy. The average reading age in the UK is about 9 years of age, unless you come from Newcastle, where it's 8, right? There's nothing wrong with coming from Newcastle. You just can't read as well as anybody else from the rest of the country, right? But that's important to know that. And I'm not taking the mickey out of my friends in Newcastle, right? But that's important to know, because we have this publish and be damned model. Oh, I've put it out there, I've talked to a few people, it's readable. It ain't. And it's absolutely crucial, and we'll come on to language in a minute. And there's lovely things out there, you know, this is, again, but look at this interesting title. It's correct, but it's a bit of a mouthful. And despite being a pharmacist, I can't pronounce any drug names anymore. Literally, I don't know where they come from, but, you know, I'm like, tab. Yeah, I'm taking that, thanks very much. And the statin you're taking? I mean, it's like, hello? It's like, what are they? And then the actual proprietary names aren't much better either, you know. Okay, you know what I mean, right? Hello? Oh yes, we're a consumer, patient-focused industry, and I take I mean, that's where regulators get in the way, perhaps, right? So here's a wonderful advert for Seralasatab and Durlabababab, right? Come on. Some of the basics, right? Are we allowed to change drug names? Are we allowed to talk about science in a way that patients might understand? Oh, I don't know. But again, are we looking out or are we looking up? And what are we telling those people who are trying to do the right thing in the regulatory side of things? And then even with this, it's interesting, but where can I learn more about this trial, right? We talked about clinical trials, we've talked about this. Do I want 3 places to go? Or as I said earlier, do I want to go onto the NHS app in the UK, or do I want to go into one place, right? And what's nice is we're beginning to think about once you're on the website, once you're on the website, once you're on the website. What happens if I'm not digitally literate? Back to the gentleman who gave a great presentation on the issue with older people. But it's not just older people. There's silver surfers out there who know far better and more digitally literate than me. I'm now getting to the point at 57 where I'm beginning to get a bit stuck. Please put it on Slack. Please do this in ChatGPT. Please download this on this. I'm beginning to get a bit like, can you not just send me an email with an attachment? You know, with all this Google permissions and all the rest of it. I'm getting to a point where I'm at literally the fringes of my ability to operate a business and to do that stuff. It's getting a bit hard for me. And your language, oh my goodness. Whoa. Would you like to take part in a clinical trial? Yes, I'd like somebody with a white coat to get a lab rat and turn me into one of them and stick a tube up somewhere and do blood draws and do all these wonderful things to me. I don't know what you guys think, right? But have any of you been in a clinical trial? About 5, 6 of you. But you work in the industry. Do you know something I don't? Eat your own dog food. Do it yourself and see what it's like. Then you can maybe go to the table tonight and explain what you do. If you guys aren't doing it, why would you expect someone else to do it? It's because you talk a completely foreign language. If someone said to me, and they did, do you want to be involved in a clinical trial? I automatically think, I don't know why, of Frankenstein. I literally think of an old black and white movie of Frankenstein and tubes and all that sort of stuff. It doesn't sound like a great experience. Yes, you may need to get in to discuss what a trial is, but are you allowed to start and say, would you like to talk about developing a new medicine? Would you like to give feedback to, in our case, a national health service that's publicly funded? Is it part of your citizenship, part of your responsibility? And then once you're in, will you talk about subjects and participants and investigators and burdens and protocols and endpoints and lay summaries? So you're calling me lay? What does that mean? I'm stupid, right? Right? Drug. Oh, I love that word. Do you want to take a drug? Oh, yes, please. It's a medicine. Once you've finished what you guys do, it becomes a medicine. I'm fed up hearing about a drug that's been authorized, still called a drug. You're not the drug industry. You're the drug development and the medicines making industry. You're making medicines. That as a cultural term, as a term for the public, is much more accepting than the word drug. So please stop calling yourself the drug industry. You're devaluing what you do. And as I said earlier, go back, just please, if there's one thing you do tonight is back to the 2 ears and 1 mouth. Say a little sentence saying, do you know what I do at work? I do this, and see how it resonates. Listen to the feedback. Because that's what you need to begin to do. If we really want to make clinical trials, research and development, medicines, device, and digital health and digital therapeutics something that people want to get more involved in, we have to look at it from their perspective, where it's a person, not from the X perspective, where it's a clinical trial. Where's that clock? Oh, I've got plenty of time. You said I could go 10 minutes over, didn't you? Yeah, thanks very much. All right. And the important thing is tell stories, right? I love stories. I know about 3 of the people on here, but tell our stories. Ella's smiling at you, Trishna's smiling at you. Hello, right? But tell it, make it real. Speak from the heart, you know? It's not just about the data and the science. It's absolutely important, but again, turn it on its head and talk to things that resonate. People speaking from the heart into your heart. People speaking from your head go in and out, at least my head, right? And break some of the myths. There's an awful lot of myths out there. A clinical trial is not Frankenstein, Mark. We're not going to stick a tube into every one of your orifices. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I won't take part, right? But you know what I mean, right? There's myths out there about just how scary and crazy this is. And again, hearing from people saying, we can take things into your home. It doesn't need to be some crazy stuff that happens to you in a lab where you feel like a pig, a guinea pig. And again, I managed, and I'm not advertising Medidata over anyone, although they did give me a teddy at the lunch break, so I am slightly biased, and I'm going to have to report it on Disclosure UK when I get back, right? But there's the idea of putting the science first or the patients first. I've heard an awful lot of both today. And I got phoned up as a person with diabetes about 6 months ago, and they said to me, Mark, you've registered for diabetes research. I said, yes, I have. I said, can I just check who you are and how you got my number? And they said, yeah, through Hope Hospital in Manchester, just to legitimize that this wasn't some crank call. So, yep. Would you like to take part in a 30-day inpatient stay in either Manchester Foundation Trust or Salford Royal? I said, 30 days, like off work and full time? They said, yeah. I said, that's quite a burden on a patient. I said, are my kids allowed to visit me or not? And they said, oh, no, they can visit you. I said, well, if they can't visit me, you don't have to pay me so much, right? But joking aside, what do you need to be in there for 30 days? Where are you going? What? Right? Is it that bad?
Closer, actually. I'll start here.
Come on. Any time, son. Right? Make it invisible. And we've heard about this before, right? Wearables, right? Patient diaries. Who's filled in a patient diary? I phoned a company about 6 months ago, a major company. We've heard from them today. I said to them, we've got a really interesting patient diary that's electronic. Mark, we're still using pen and paper. Those of you that put your hand up that sat in a trial, when you go for your weekly visit and you're sitting there filling in your diary from the day, I don't know how many of you have done this. You sit there and go, what was last Tuesday? What was last Wednesday? What was last Thursday? And you put something down. That's the very data you're using to submit to regulators that is supposed to validate or not your medicine. Hello? It's the lifeblood of the industry, and you're relying on pen and paper and somebody to make it up in a clinic. That's really valid, that is, right? And then, as I said to you before, stop with the shiny bit. Can we just, if you're doing it in one therapy area, if you're doing it in one country, can you begin to replicate it? Find somebody in your company, in your project management bit, on your customer experience bit, who's good at sharing and copying and replicate. That's the job of senior management, not to be out there grandstanding all the time, but literally to make their organization function better across all the different silos. And all I hear about is, oh, well, that doesn't work in this country, and there's different regulations. Listen, you can make it work. You've done it in this place, you can do it in lots more places. I'm part of Trials at Home, which I don't have time to advertise, because I'm literally now down to a few minutes left. But again, have a wee look at that, supported by Sanofi. But what's interesting is it's looking at sort of decentralized trials, but it's been quite burdensome to get involved in it. And it sometimes feels that here we're trying to test whether decentralized trials work, but we're using a sort of old-fashioned centralized trials model. I'll probably get shot for saying that, but I've sort of stepped back from being on the patient panel because I've just found it incredibly onerous. It wasn't fast, it wasn't quick, the documentation was long and onerous, and I thought, there's something not quite working here. Now, I can't even pronounce this, but again, just an example, what is medical grade? What is home grade? What is consumer grade? What's acceptable to do at home? We've talked a little bit about wearables, and yes, the regulators have regulations, but if we're seeing things that I can use in the comfort of my own home, and I don't need to be jabbed and prodded by anybody, but I can do it to myself, let's go there. And experience matters. So as a pharmacist, I'm embarrassed to be part of a profession where 50% of the medicines I dispense are not taken as directed. No one's mentioned medicines taking today. You spend billions, 5 billion I read last night, on a medicine, and then 50% of the patients, again, rare disease, differs, but generally don't take it because you don't think about the medicines taking experience. And I think you need to. So map the journey from literally right the way through, from asset development right the way through to hopefully consumption and real world data and outcomes. You do awareness well, I think. You do recruitment, right? You do the retention bit. But I cut my fingers on my blister packs at least once every 3 months. Your manufacturing is more important than my capillary blood. I'm not going to tell you now about the joke that I've had in dealing with my diabetes with self-injectable pens, right? Couple of Danish companies, oh my goodness me, you're doing really well. Not quite, but I'm not far away with one of the devices from sticking it somewhere else. Oh, come on, come here, come on, right? And tell us what you're, I've got 3 slides left, is that okay?
God, please.
Is that all right? Oh, I'm over, right. Tell us what you're doing with our data. It's our data. We have something about to say Scotland and England called Use My Data. 500 cancer patients begging the NHS to do more with their data. You've got it, please use it. Learn from consumers. All of you, or most of you, have sold your consumer division. You're bloody idiots, right? Honestly, because they understand consumers. Do you? No, right? So go and learn from people like this. They've got a consumer product. It's a plant product. It's got the most amazing, beautiful interface that allows you to do own dose delivery and real-world evidence submission and adherence and compliance data. This, anybody got kids? I love them. You can have some of mine, right? I've got a 15-year-old who's I'm about to put on the black market. Anybody wants to buy him, you can have his kidneys, whatever you want. He's lovely, but I just need, I've got 5 of them and he's enough. I bought each of them one of these mobiles, but when they see it, they're looking at a bunch of bums, right? So if you don't co-develop, you can end up with a bum product. We can also make products as patients. Nearly finished. So, I'm having such a laugh, right? I shouldn't have had that whiskey at lunch, honestly. That was really... Go out and make new friends. I'll be your friend, okay? Please, I'd love to talk to you. Get out more. The Roche is lovely and you've got a big tower and it's very impressive, right? But get out of it a bit. Go and talk to some people about what you do. Tell us what you're doing. I can't wait till the time when the regulators turn to you and say, that was great. Here's 30% for your clinical submission. I'll give you another 40% or 30% of the drug cost when the patients take it, but you're only getting the 40% when your real-world evidence, right, from my wearable and all the rest of it matches your clinical trial data. Can't think of any other companies that don't do that. Goodbye.
So.
I'm 2 minutes over, I'm sorry. I was having such fun, I get carried away.
Thank you. I'm an MD, so I think I should know patients. But as with the diversity panel, I completely lose my thread after these talks. So ladies and gentlemen, please, Mark Duman, patient and person.
Thank you. You want to sit here?